Hello and good evening, everybody. And tonight we are going to tackle episode 48 of Album Rant. And well, just to be perfectly honest, this was a video I had to do fairly soon. And I'm going to get to the reason why later towards the conclusion of the video, but I am going to return to the world of Judas Priest. Now, here's the thing. Before this video, before this moment, I have actually talked about Judas Priest in some context, one or another, 4 times. But I've only actually done one episode of Album Rant on them. So this is going to be the 5th time I have talked about Judas Priest. And it's going to be the 2nd time that I have done an episode of Album Rant. And tonight, it is going to be their most recent effort, 2024's Invincible Shield. And you can see right there, we have the cover. And yes, I am really excited for this. Now, I've kind of given y'all quite a history of the band in the past. But as you all know, they originated in the late 60s. And the lineup was completely different than what it was like on their first actual album, but they went through a revolving door of band members before finally releasing their very first album entitled Rock-a-Rolla in the year 1974. And it was very much not heavy metal. It was very much not what the band is most well known for. It was more blues rock and some influences of hippie rock as well. I mean, if you just look at the band perform during that time period, they did not don the black leather and all that. Instead, they definitely had more hippie attire, and it's really, it's kind of funny. But throughout the 70s, they had 5 studio releases that I thought were pretty phenomenal. It went Rock-a-Rolla, Sad Wings of Destiny, Sin After Sin, Stained Class, and Killing Machine. But then in 1980, they basically streamlined their approach. They quote-unquote found their sound, and they released what is considered by many, not me actually, but by many, to be their greatest release and one of the greatest metal records ever, entitled British Steel. And they followed it up with Point of Entry, Screaming for Vengeance, Defenders of the Faith, kind of dove into pop rock for a bit with Turbo, but then kicked things right back up with Ram It Down and Painkiller. But then in the 90s, unfortunately, Rob Halford, the lead vocalist, left the band to pursue a solo career, and they released 2 other albums without him. It was 1997's Jugulator, and then 2001's Demolition. And 2001 is right around the time I started getting into Judas Priest. And they were helmed by Tim Ripper Owens. And I thought he was pretty decent. I thought if Rob Halford is not going to be in the band, if he is not going to be the lead singer, Ripper Owens was probably the best replacement they could have come up with. The albums weren't horrible, but at the same time, they weren't really that good. But Rob Halford rejoined the band in the year 2004, I want to say, 2005, and they released Angel of Retribution, which I thought was okay. Then they released Nostradamus in 2008, which I thought was god-awful. It was a very pathetic attempt at prog metal, and it just did not work. And I actually heard, I think, Halford say that they initially intended to play that entire album in concert on that tour, and boy, I am glad they rethought their strategy and did not go that direction. But after Nostradamus, a longtime guitarist, I think he'd been with them ever since the beginning, at least ever since Rock-a-Rolla, K.K. Downing left the band. He was replaced by Richie Faulkner. So now the lineup is Rob Halford on lead vocals, Richie Faulkner on lead guitar, Glenn Tipton on lead guitar, Ian Hill on bass guitar, and Scott Travis on the drums. And they released Redeemer of Souls, which I thought was a lot better than Angel of Retribution and Nostradamus. A few of the songs were kind of flat, but I thought it was pretty solid. And unfortunately, after the Redeemer of Souls tour, Glenn Tipton has Parkinson's disease, and he is now unable to tour full-time, and he can only make sporadic, occasional appearances, unfortunately. And in concert, he is currently being replaced by their producer, Andy Snap. I could be saying that wrong, and quite frankly, I don't care. But he did still contribute to the songwriting, and he is still contributing to the actual album. And in 2018, they released Firepower, which I absolutely loved, and I did talk about it on my Judas Priest ranking video, which I released a few months ago. And well, anyways, after Firepower, it was all a question. Could they follow up what I thought was their greatest release since 1990, actually? Yeah, believe it or not. Maybe that's not saying too much, but I do think that is a thing. And that brings me to tonight's topic, which is going to be 2024's Invincible Shield, which is produced by Andy Snap and Tom Allum, who has been with the band ever since the 70s, I think, actually. Pretty impressive. But anyways, the writing for this album began in 2020, shortly after the Firepower tour ended. And unfortunately, we had a little thing called the COVID-19 pandemic, and this really affected the songwriting for the album. The schedules had to be altered, and unfortunately, it put a delay on the album. Now, Richie Faulkner has said that he wanted to keep the album as dynamic as Firepower, so that was the goal. And I think overall they achieved that. But in September 2021, they embarked on their 50 Years of Heavy Metal tour, which I did see, and it was pretty incredible. And it was more of a retrospective tour where they picked songs from various, they picked songs from most of their albums that spanned over their entire career, and I really, really enjoyed it. But while they were touring, they were also writing, and again, there were a lot of restrictions still in place due to the pandemic, and it was really a very difficult process. But finally, by the year 2024, they actually released the album, and I am glad that the wait was worth it. And according to Richie Faulkner, the album is a lot more progressive than Firepower, which I'm not sure if I fully agree with that, but we'll see. But at the same time, it is not a artsy, proggy piece of crap like Nostradamus was. So let's see what we have inside. We have a gatefold. We have a song list right there. We have the Invincible Shield anthem. United we stand. Divided we fall. Defenders of metal. For one and for all. Keeping the faith. Honor and pride. Strengthen this bloodline. God on our side. Eternal and mortal. Metal burns bright. Lifting our horns. Ready to fight. Stand and bear witness. With all due our might, as we raise the Invincible Shield. We come over here, and we have the lineup. Rob Halford on lead vocals. Glenn Tipton on lead guitar. Yes, he does still write the songs, and he still does perform on the albums, just not in tour. Richie Faulkner on lead guitar. Ian Hill, longtime member Ian Hill on bass guitar, and then Scott Travis on the drums. So let's go to the back, and it's all going to kick off with side 1 or side A of record 1. Yes, this thing was so long it had to span onto 2 records, 4 different sides. And it kicks off with the lead single. This was the very first one they released, I think October of 2023, and it's called Panic Attack. And I'm going to be honest, when this thing first starts, you might be a little worried because we have keyboards. And in a way, it almost sounds like Turbo, which is not a period in the band's history that I want to return to. But anyways, after that keyboard intro, things start kicking in as you might think. And again, the Turbo influences basically begin and end here, and I am very, very happy for that. But this thing is very, very fast, very explosive, and well, I love it. The chorus has got this nice little staccato thing going. It goes, panic attack, and it's great. By the way, I know I cannot sing anything like Rob Halford, and I'm not really trying to. They did play this the last time I saw them, which was last month, actually. I saw them on this tour, and it was great. This was the very first song that they played, and that keyboard intro was not played by the band. It was played on a sound speaker. But then once the keyboard intro was done, the band comes in, and, well, it was pretty awesome. I pretty much figured they were going to play this one. I pretty much figured this was going to be the first song they played. That was no surprise, and yeah, it was a great opener, and I very, very, very much did enjoy it. So yeah, Panic Attack, even though it starts out being reminiscent of Turbo, it ends up being reminiscent of Painkiller, which I know those 2 albums have very little in common, but you know, the contrast kind of makes it work. But it segues into The Serpent and the King, and you're going to notice a recurring theme throughout this album. There are a lot of songs that have religious themes on them, and well, you know, I don't mind that at all. But this thing, again, starts out very, very fast. It comes out kicking. It's got a very cranking guitar riff right off the bat, and Rob Halford comes in shortly after the intro, and he sings the majority of this in his falsetto. He sounds a lot like King Diamond, which I am not complaining about because King Diamond is pretty awesome, okay? But again, the song is incredibly fast. Again, it feels a lot like Painkiller, and I am not complaining because I love Painkiller. The chorus is incredibly simplistic. It just goes, the serpent and the king! The serpent and the king! Yeah, not much to it, but, you know, even with that simplicity, it still kind of works, okay? There is a great drum solo in the middle, or some great drum work in the middle, as I should say. Scott Travis has been with the band for the past 34 years. He is their longest-lasting drummer, and, well, he absolutely knocks it out of the park here. The interlude is heavy. The interlude is amazing. And, well, side A really kicks things off very, very well. We have 2 very strong tracks right from the get-go. My favorite from side A is probably Panic Attack. I just think the rhythm is more creative. I think the rhythm is better, but that's no impunity on The Serpent and the King. It's still a great song, but 2 great songs. I have to pick one or the other, and well, it's Panic Attack. So now we come to side B. Let me try to zoom in a little bit more. Yeah. And side B is going to start with Invincible Shield, which they also played on the tour when I saw them last May. And, well, I really enjoy this one. This is the longest song, I want to say, on this album. It's 6 minutes and 21 seconds. And, yeah, I know if we're going by artists like Iron Maiden or Metallica or Rush, 6 minutes and 21 seconds isn't really that long. But for this album, that is pretty long. But, again, it starts out very, very fast. And what I kind of like is after it starts kicking in, there are a few moments where it slows down for just a bit before kicking back up. And, well, that's kind of how the intro goes, and I really dig it. The lyrics are very, very medieval, at least in my opinion. I read you the Invincible Shield anthem, so you kind of get a taste of, what they're going for here. But again, much like The Serpent and the King, Rob mostly sings this in falsetto, which I also really like. But it goes, invincible, our masses are united, invincible, forever and a day, invincible, can never be divided, and nothing can stand in our way, Invincible Shield. Yes, that was terrible, I'm sorry, I'm doing my best here. But yeah, I really do like the title track, and I think it's a great addition, and like I said, they did play it in concert, and I really liked it. Then we come to The Devil in Disguise. 4 minutes and 44 seconds. And, yeah, this one starts out a little bit more slow. It's definitely a lot slower than what came before. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But this one's a lot more brooding than the first three. And, they're not going to play fast songs all the time. But, I mean, The Devil in Disguise is a pretty solid song, but, I'm not really digging this chorus here. I mean, it's basically, he's the devil in disguise! Not really much to it, but, I don't mind it, but it definitely could have been better. And then side B is going to conclude with The Gates of Hell, which again is another slower song, and this one really sounds more melodic than the other ones. Don't get me wrong, it is still very much a metal song. It very much is. But, like I said, it's a little bit, it's a little bit slower and a little bit, maybe not as aggressive as some of the other songs on here, but, after the intro, it does kind of pick up a bit, but it's still, again, it's very brooding. But basically, we're screaming through the gates of hell, we got fire in our veins, and, it's decent, but I guess this comes as no surprise. The title track is going to be my favorite from side B, and so, yeah, we have that. So now we come to the second record, and we come to the third side, side C. And it starts out with Crown of Horns, which again, kind of continues that whole religious theme this album seems to be going for. And they also did play this on the tour, and I did enjoy hearing it. I didn't know too much about this song, at least not as much as maybe some of the other songs they play, because, well, I've been listening for the past 20 years. But this one it's heavy, but it's much slower than what you have grown accustomed to with these guys. It's definitely still more melodic, like The Gates of Hell, but I wouldn't call it a ballad, but it's definitely softer, and yeah, parts of it sound kind of sad, maybe more like those ballads they did back in the early 70s when they were still trying to figure things out. I mean, this definitely has an emotional punch to it, which I can definitely respect and everything, but it's not quite my favorite song from this album. But we then come to As God Is My Witness, which is the second track, 8th song overall, and this thing picks things right back up, and it comes out swinging very fast. And it's basically, as God is my witness, I swear there'll be hell to pay. And again, a very simplistic chorus in my opinion, but part of it kind of sounds like Leather Rebel from Painkiller, which I thought was kind of interesting, but it may not quite be as good as that song, but it's still very solid. But yeah, the bridge in the middle, they have the verse, the chorus, the verse, the chorus, and they do something different. That's the bridge. It's got some very great guitar work, either by Glenn or Richie, and it sounds very Needle-like, which I definitely respect, and it sounds pretty awesome. The last song from side C is going to be the last single that was released prior to this album's release, and it's going to be Trial by Fire. And well, when I first heard this song, here's what I said to myself. We now officially live in a world where both Kiss and Judas Priest have a song called Trial by Fire. I'm not sure if that's a good thing, but it's a thing, I'll tell you that, okay? This has a fading guitar solo intro. It's very interesting. Sounds almost like Victim of Changes, in my opinion. I mean, definitely I can tell the difference and everything, but it seems like they took a very, very similar approach. And, you know, it's still pretty heavy, but it's also, like some of these other tracks, rather brooding. And, I mean, the chorus is pretty decent. Burden of guilt, Brandon a liar, I have endured trial by fire. And, you know, I think it's good for what it is, but if I'm going to be honest, side C, or side 3, or whatever, off the second record, I think As God Is My Witness is going to be my favorite one from that one. So we now move to the very last side, and I'm going to admit, I think the record kind of loses some steam here. Don't get me wrong, I do love Escape from Reality. I mean, it's a little bit darker and slower than maybe some of their faster material, but, you know, it's still pretty solid. The interlude, however, or the bridge may not quite be my thing. It's gonna sound kind of weird, but it sounds sludgy, if that makes sense. It just sounds like, you gotta hear it to really understand what I'm saying, but I hear a lot of and it's just not quite what I'm into, but, you know, once things start kicking up once again, it's still pretty solid. Agony, escape from reality brings you down. Then we come to Sons of Thunder, which is only 2 minutes and 58 seconds. It's not really that long, and I think it's a little bit disposable, unfortunately. But we finally get to the album closer, Giants in the Sky, and I think this really could have been a great track, but here's the thing. Unfortunately, this sounds a lot like Children of the Sun from Firepower. I don't know what it is. I mean, it's written by the same 3 people, Rob Halford, Glenn Tipton, and Richie Faulkner. And it really just sounds like a leftover from Firepower, which is really a shame. But, I mean, for the song itself, I think it works well enough. I mean, they have definitely had worse closers than this one. But I do got to give props to the interlude, or the bridge, once again. They do something a little bit different. It's a little bit softer, and there is even some acoustic guitar there, which I was really kind of surprised by. But if I'm going to be honest, side D is definitely the weakest one, but Escape from Reality is probably going to be my favorite. So just to recap, once again, Panic Attack was my favorite from side A. The title track is my favorite from side B. What did I say? I think it was As God's My Witness. Yeah. As God's My Witness is my favorite from side C. And then Escape from Reality is going to be my favorite from side D. Maybe I changed my mind midway through. Too late now. So anyways, that concludes my episode of Album Rant on Invincible Shield. But that is not the last thing I have to say here. A few months ago, I made a Judas Priest album ranking video, and well, I have to update it. At the time, Invincible Shield had not been released, so I couldn't include it. And after this was released, I needed some time to process this album, hear it a few times, really get a fair assessment of it. So now I am going to update and recap my new Judas Priest album ranking. Well, 19th place, last place is still Turbo. 18th place is Nostradamus. 17th place is Demolition. Whoops. 16th place is the Jugulator. 15th place is Point of Entry. 14th place is Angel of Retribution. What am I on? 19, 18, 17. Yeah. 13th place is Rockarola. 12th place is Ram It Down. 11th place is Redeemer of Souls. 10th place. Here is where things are going to diverge. 10th place is Invincible Shield. Wait. No, that's 11th place. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. No, 10th place. Whoa, sorry, got my wires crossed. 10th place is Invincible Shield. 9th place is Killing Machine. 8th place is Firepower. 7th place, Sad Wings of Destiny. 6th place, Painkiller. 5th place, British Steel. 4th place, Defenders of the Faith. 3rd place, Sin After Sin. 2nd place, Stained Class. And 1st place, the winner, still remains Screaming for Vengeance. Next time, or next week, we're going to see the lightning flash before our eyes because it's electric. But until then, have a very pleasant evening.